Hamas leader Khaled Mashal made a dramatic statement this week declaring that Hamas will not disarm because weapons are like the soul of the Palestinian people. But he also added that it is possible to keep the weapons in Gaza and not to use them. And meanwhile, Hamas has stopped the searches for the remains of Staff Sgt. Guiyali, while Israel clarified to the mediators that we will not move to the second stage of this deal until the abducted fallen is returned. Israeli officials also exposed the lies and conveyed to the mediators precise information, including the area and the people who were involved, in order to assist in locating the remains of Guiyali. And elsewhere, President Trump said that he would reveal the members of the Peace Council for Gaza at the beginning of 2026, adding that it will be a legendary lineup. Now, getting back to Khaled Mashal, he claimed in an interview this week with Al Jazeera that the Palestinian struggle is enjoying unprecedented support around the world, and even asserted that 51% of American youth are with Hamas. Is he right? Also, today, we will bring you special testimonies on how Hamas is a cruel, heartless terrorist organization that still abuses the families of the hostages even after their bodies have been returned to Israel. Yes, today we will give you a glimpse of the true face of those terrorists whom students at universities in the United States call freedom fighters, and a rare peek into Hamas's death tunnel and the hell of Hamas. Further afield, the Iraqi militias and the Houthis are threatening to invade Israel through Jordan, and the IDF is taking these threats very seriously and prepared. On the northern border, an event occurred this week that lit red warning lights as 400 fully armed terrorists on 40 open-bed Toyota pickup trucks paraded themselves within the sight of the IDF troops in the buffer zone in the Golan Heights. Is the Golan Heights also in the crosshairs? Is the IDF on its way to a large-scale military operation in Lebanon? This week, the Air Force struck the Radwan forces deep inside Lebanon. The United States is also applying pressure on the internationally recognized government in Beirut as we come near to that headline that Lebanon will almost certainly fail to meet. And the countdown begins for Trump's green light for the IDF to take business into its own hands. So welcome to Boots on the Ground Weekend Edition. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you all the truth about what is happening here in Israel. LEKET Israel is our partner for today's report. They're making a difference, and we'll tell you how later in this show. Now, even though it seems that the news about fighting is quieter, the situation on the ground is actually bubbling like a barrel of gunpowder waiting to explode. Terror organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, which try to grant themselves broad legitimacy for their malfunction and their extreme existence in the world, continue to use evil in order to try and destroy the state of Israel and the Jewish people. So let's go over the headlines that slipped by us this week. The President of the United States is pressing to move to phase 2 of his plan for the Gaza Strip and promised to reveal the members of the Peace Council at the beginning of 2026, declaring that everyone wants to be on it, kings, presidents, and prime ministers. But the situation on the ground tells us a different story. A member of the Hamas terrorist leadership and their council spoke out this week and strongly rejected the demand to disarm. Instead, the terrorist organization is playing games. Hamas wants a new outline in place of the Trump outline, which will include guarantees not to renew the war and storage of the weapons in exchange for a long-term, temporary ceasefire. Again, only temporary. Hamas has also stopped the searches from Staff Sgt. Guiyali, an IDF soldier who died in captivity in the Gaza Strip because of the weather conditions. Senior Hamas official Khaled Mashal, who has been sleeping for 2 years in luxury hotels in Qatar and around the world, said that it's a matter of motivation and that the Islamic Jihad transferred all the remains that they had in their hands. In response, the IDF conveys to the mediators precise information to assist them in the location of Guiyali, and Israeli officials said that we conveyed a firm message. The issue of returning Rani is a highly significant event in the implementation of this agreement. The Islamic Jihad claim is a lie, and the responsibility is on Hamas. And meanwhile, the Iraqi militias and the Houthis in Yemen are threatening to invade Israel through Jordan, and the IDF is taking these threats very seriously and is preparing. The Jordanian border has been very quiet for a long time, although there has been smuggling and occasional terrorist attacks coming through that border over the years. But Hamas's surprise attack on October 7 changed the perception from end to end. And in Israel, an Iranian threat is identified on the eastern border. Now, IDF forces are being redeployed in the area, manning posts that were abandoned in the past and establishing 5 reserve brigades. Also, this week, 400 fully armed terrorists on 40 open-bed Toyota pickup trucks paraded past the IDF positions in the buffer zone in a clear warning that the Golan is also in the crosshairs. Also, security sources warn that as we approach Ramadan, the Muslim month, 2 events should worry us, starting with the rise of terror organizations in Tulkarem in Judea and Samaria and the renewed clashes between IDF forces and elements in Syria. The IDF is preparing for a surprise breach of a scenario in the Syrian sector similar to what happened in October 7. And next door in Lebanon, the internationally recognized government is set to miss the deadline for disarming Hezbollah, the terrorist organization that was set in the ceasefire agreement. Now, the IDF is waiting for a green light from President Trump to move in and finish the job completely. In Beirut, they claim that they have completed 80% of Hezbollah's disarmament south of the Litani River, but Israeli officials say that they're skeptical of this claim, and there is general pessimism that they will meet the deadline, declaring that we will not wait forever. However, the United States is asking for more time, and the issue will likely be decided at the Trump-Netanyahu summit later on this month. There is also concern that the president will impose understandings with Syria, while there is also anticipation of an apology of the American envoy Thomas Barak to Netanyahu. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your just before the weekend edition of Boots on the Ground, bringing you all the truth about what's happening in Israel on this rainy day. It's day 797 against the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the control of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And 1 second before we start, we need to ask you to keep spreading the truth, because we're at a stage where it's hard for us to distribute our content and the algorithm is changing. That's where we need you, because every share, every comment, every like helps us reach more people with what's happening here on the ground. So if you want to help us, make sure that you hit the subscribe button on YouTube so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So we'll start today's report with reports about 2 highly unusual events. The first was the discovery of a terror cell in Tulkarem on Tuesday, which is not so unusual, but what makes this discovery particularly alarming is that it included evidence that the terrorist groups on Israel's eastern flank are beginning to arm themselves with rockets, similar to the weapons that Hamas has been firing out of the Gaza Strip against us for years. The second event is another incident between the Syrian civilians and the soldiers of the 55 Reserve Paratrooper Brigade, who operated deep inside Syrian territory this week in the area near Quneitra. The event ended with the paratroopers firing at Syrian civilians who tried to close in on the IDF force. As you might recall, recently the IDF Chief of Staff held a special discussion on preparedness of a surprise attack from Syria or even from the Jordanian border. Some of the terrorist organizations that are operating in southeastern Syria act with Iranian funding and with their support. These are not ragtag gangs and militias, but heavily armed and equipped gunmen riding in open-bed Toyota pickups, some of which have machine guns mounted on top. Each pickup can carry a force of about 10 terrorists, fully equipped with light weapons, including rifles, pistols, grenades, and also knives. and the IDF is supposed to be prepared for the possibility that 30 and perhaps 40 such pickups will decide to set out from 2 or 3 points in southern or central Syrian Golan and move quickly towards the Israeli border. Therefore, the IDF erected an obstacle meant to delay a breach into the Israeli territory. I saw it with my own eyes when we produced our report inside Syria. And it's very deep. It's a trench that runs parallel to the border. And the IDF says that the deployed forces will be able to handle most of the breaching forces, 20 to 30 such vehicles that are loaded with heavily armed terrorists. However, if even a few get through the defenses and reach the Israeli communities in the Guiyali, it is clear to everyone what will happen next. And we all remember October 7th. Here lies exactly the reason for the vigorous activities of the soldiers of the 55 Reserve Paratrooper Brigade 2 weeks ago in the village of Bejin in the southern Syrian Golan Heights. During an operation arresting terrorists from the Jama'ah Ismailiyah, which is a large terrorist organization that is operating in that area, the terrorists opened fire on the IDF forces. And during the ensuing battle, 6 fighters were wounded, 3 of them seriously, while the IDF eliminated about 20 terrorists in this incident. So it happened again this week when the brigade's forces entered the village of Khan Anaba, east of Syrian Quneitra. The goal is to create friction with those terrorists on their home turf, trying to keep them busy with defensive tasks in their own area and not with building attack plans. So please, pray that the IDF will succeed in deterring the terrorist groups based in the southern Syria area so that they will not even try to launch more attacks against Israeli communities in the Golan or in the Galilee area. And now, let's move to the second friction front that surprisingly hasn't been talked about so much in the past 2 years. I'm talking about Judea and Samaria. This week, the Shin Bet, the IDF, and the border police managed to expose an organization of terrorists in the city of Tulkarem that apparently received assistance and guidance from external elements. This is as part of the Shin Bet's interrogation of one of the terrorists, Ahmed Abu Samara. It emerged that he was involved in attaching an explosive device to an IDF Panther armored vehicle last September in an attack that wounded several soldiers, in addition to an attempted attack in a similar pattern against another military vehicle. This is all happening as well as other similar attacks resulted in IDF casualties in that area in Judea and Samaria. Additional suspects were arrested and were handed over to the Shin Bet for interrogation. Amongst them, Khalil Karishach, a resident of Tulkarem, who confessed to being a partner in advancing IED's attacks, including the attack in which the former Menashe Brigade commander was wounded. It also supplied the components and the means that are required for manufacturing these weapons. And following their interrogations, IDF forces from the Ephraim Brigade under the Shin Bet intelligence direction set out on November 17, 2025 in the city of Tulkarem and located 3 rockets in various stages of preparation, including explosive charges, activation systems, bomb-making components, and materials for preparing explosives. One of the rockets was found with a warhead and explosive material. It is important for you to know, so you can pray accordingly for this situation, that in a few weeks the month of Ramadan will begin. It is a month that arouses national impulses in the territories of the Palestinian Authority and even in parts of the Arab sector in Israel. So the defense establishment is already beginning to prepare for it right now. The understanding in the IDF and in the security establishment of Israel is that after October 7th, the entire army must be coiled like a spring for the option that from one of the areas someone will try to challenge Israel with a surprise attack and try to infiltrate our communities. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on this matter, so keep spreading the truth, share and follow us. And it's very important that you lend a hand in this war against all the lies and misinformation that are being spread around the world against what's happening in Israel. We need your help. But first, I want to tell you about a dire threat to Israel's security that few people know about. child hunger is Israel's enemy within, because Israel's children, its future guardians, scientists, entrepreneurs, and politicians, are its most sacred resources. But tragically, 1/3 of Israel's children are not receiving the daily nutrition that they need to learn and grow. Their parents try their best, but raising food prices and the damage from Hamas attacks have forced them to produce less and provide less. And what they can provide is often poor quality and lacking in nutritional value. Fortunately, LEKET Israel understands the need to protect Israel's children from this threat. LEKET Israel, the National Food Bank, sources high-quality, nutritious food from farmers and businesses and provides it to struggling families all across Israel. They also provide education so that parents will know how to make the most of their low grocery budget. Impoverished Israeli parents now see their kids eagerly open their LEKET food boxes and go to school, alert and ready to learn and grow into Israel's future. As Israeli parent Olga Mankir says, she calls me Dad. The boxes are here. Come pick them up. They're full of fresh, healthy food that we couldn't otherwise afford. With 7 people at home, fruit and vegetables are often a luxury. God is using LEKET Israel to raise up Israel's next generation and fight Israel's enemy within. And He wants you to be involved. So if you want to help feed the kids of Israel during this time of war, visit feedisraelikids.org. Again, that's feedisraelikids.org. And now we're getting back into the news and switching our focus to the Gaza Strip. Combat team forces of the Northern Brigade operating in the northern Gaza Strip area this week identified 2 terrorists who crossed the yellow line and approached the forces in a manner that posed an immediate threat. Immediately after identification, the forces eliminated one of the terrorists in order to remove this threat. The incident comes against the background of ongoing violations of the ceasefire by the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. Israeli officials are in preparation for the next stage of this deal, in which Hamas is expected to prepare for disarmament and give up its arms, a step that is considered critical to the stability of the area and the region at large. And meanwhile, Hamas announced that due to the weather, it is taking a break from searches operations for the abducted fallen hostage, Staff Sgt. Guiyali, in the Zaytun neighborhood of Gaza City. As published, Israel informed the mediators that it will not move to the second stage in this ceasefire agreement until Staff Sgt. Guiyali is returned. Following Israel's pressure, Hamas is operating in the Zaytun neighborhood, amongst other things, with Islamic Jihad operatives who, according to Israeli assessments, hold Guiyali's remains. And according to an Israeli security source, they know the area very well where he is. This is a matter of motivation and a matter of capability. We know that they have the ability to do it. The problem is that they need more motivation, and we believe that they can exert more effort. However, the assessment is that searches for the remains of Guiyali will resume towards the weekend after the weather will allow it. When I say weather, by the way, I'm not talking about some mild problems. Israel is being hit by a named storm called Byron this week, and there is massive rainfall, high winds, and even some flooding in certain areas of the country. And the Gaza Strip is one of the hardest areas that is hit by this weather. And with all of that in mind, it's important to point out that Israel can apply very strong and very clear pressure, and until Iran returns, Israeli officials have said that they won't move to phase B of the ceasefire plan. And right now, everyone knows we're in an interim state, in between of the stages, but this stage has devastated Hamas as well, not just us. They cannot receive many things that would allow them to begin the rebuilding of the Gaza Strip, including cement mixers, and other machinery that are needed for the reconstruction. All of this are not entering into their side of the yellow line, and the Rafah border crossing is also still closed for these purposes. So also, despite everything that we said just a moment ago, Hamas really has no excuse for not finding and handing over the remains of the last IDF soldier that is kept in the Gaza Strip. So the coordinator, Gal Hirsch, he's the coordinator for bringing the hostages back home. He transferred to the mediators aerial photos, names of individuals likely aware of the location of the remains of Guiyali, and additional information that may help locate him. Therefore, Israeli officials have rejected Palestinian Islamic Jihad's claims this week that they have completed the transfer of all the hostages that they were holding. We should not forget that it is a common practice amongst terrorist organizations to try to deceive and to keep a bargaining chip in their hands, while truth has no importance to these people whatsoever. It is certain that there are those in Palestinian Islamic Jihad who know where the remains of Rani are, and Israel had conveyed firm messages through the mediators that the return of Guiyali's remains is not a tactical matter. It is the last thing holding up the implementation of the ceasefire agreement, and Israel will not compromise on this issue. So, for their part, the Americans are also applying pressure on the mediators to put pressure on Hamas to locate Guiyali's remains, and there is hope that results will emerge in the coming days. In fact, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee said on Wednesday that he hopes that the last abducted fallen will be brought to Israel in the next 24 or 48 hours. Let's pray for that. We're switching our focus slightly to take a look at some of the regional developments that are relevant to what's going on in the Gaza Strip. So, I usually don't give a platform to what Hamas terrorists are saying, but the first thing that was exposed is that Hamas's desire to change the agreement and not to disarm as a strategic step against Israel. And because it's important to me that you understand something, let's get into the interview that happened yesterday with a Hamas terrorist, none other than the head of Hamas's international section, Khaled Mashal. This evil man has blood on his hands, but he's living in luxurious 5-star hotel in Qatar, while he tells ordinary Palestinians that they must bear the burden of the struggle and make a sacrifice. On Wednesday evening, he gave an interview with the Al Jazeera media portal and said that there are attempts to bring about the disarmament of the resistance, a matter that is rejected by the public. We will preserve a vision that includes not returning to war without harming our weapons. According to him, Hamas wants to create a framework that includes guarantees against renewal of the war in the Gaza Strip, saying that we can achieve that and it's possible to keep these weapons and not to use them or display them. At the same time, we propose the idea of a long-term hudna with a real guarantee. We have no objection to there being international stabilization forces on the ground separating between Gaza and Israel. Our friends in the world and in the region can create such a vision that can be agreed upon the American administration and thus impose it on the Israelis. The Hamas Leadership Council members added that the mediators are still discussing this with the American administration. Likewise, Mashal boasted during the interview that the Palestinian issue reverberated amongst parts of the young generation in the United States and also Europe. He said that 51% of American youth not only support the Palestinian issue, but Hamas and the resistance. Do you think that number is true? Let me know in the comments section what you think about this. Do you really think that the youth in Europe and in the United States are supporting Hamas, a terrorist organization? I'm very curious to hear. Remember, Hamas is an extreme, murderous Islamic terrorist organization that nonetheless believes that the general population in many Western countries is supporting them, and they might not be entirely wrong about that. This is our war right here, and it's why day after day I stand, if it's outside or today inside because of the rain, telling you the truth of what's happening in this land so that you will know how to pray for the next generation and how to pray for the situation. During his interview, Mashal, the Hamas leader, also boasted that the Palestinian issue restored the spirit of this region and the Islamic nation, After the nation entered the dark tunnel of the peace process and normalization and the attempt to cooperate with Israel, the nation was awakened, according to him. He also claimed that the first stage of Trump's plan has still not been completed because, according to him, Israel insists on blocking it. He accused Israel of overstepping the yellow line by advancing it and leaving 60% of the Gaza Strip under its control. Completing the first stage with all its requirements is essential before moving to the second stage. So, that's what Hamas has to say about all of the situation. Others are also making statements, and that includes the mediator countries, Qatar and Turkey, which are supposed to be neutral third parties, but in reality, they are taking Hamas's side on almost every issue. And this week, that included a request to allow Hamas to keep its weapons, but commit not to use them. And I think it's obvious that the mediators are trying to buy time for Hamas. Their main goal is to stall for time until a new election is taking place in Israel, which they hope will result in a Netanyahu-led coalition being replaced with someone who they'll have an easier time bullying into agreeing to terms that are more favorable to Hamas. There are also midterm elections coming up in the United States, and President Trump might be weakened by the result of those elections. That's what they hope for. There is also the issue of the International Stabilization Force, which is supposed to enter the Gaza Strip as part of Phase B of the ceasefire plan and confront Hamas, disarm it, and set up the conditions for a technocratic government structure to take over all the civil affairs of Gaza. The Turks are telling President Trump that they're the only force that can realistically expect to be able to do this, but I disagree. I think the Turks are more likely to help Hamas than to confront and dismantle them, and the IDF is the only force that is able to disarm this terrorist organization. So, let me know what you think about this situation in the comment section. Do you think that Israel should remain the only one to dismantle Hamas, or do you think the Turks should come to this region? I'm curious to hear what you think about this. Now, let's move on to another aspect of the plans for Phase B of the ceasefire agreement. President Donald Trump said on Wednesday evening that at the beginning of 2026, he will reveal the composition of the members of the Peace Council that is supposed to oversee the management and the reconstruction of Gaza. Specifically, he told reporters at the White House that we'll do it at the beginning of next year and will be one of the most legendary councils ever. Everyone wants to be on it. These will actually be the heads of the most important countries. Everyone wants to be there. It wasn't in the plan. We thought there would be many distinguished people who do this for a living, but it seems that it will be kings, presidents, prime ministers. They all want to be on the Peace Council. The one who apparently will not lead this Peace Council is former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, following objections voiced by Arab and also Muslim states. Blair was the only person specifically mentioned as a member of the President's Peace Council, but Arab countries opposed his appointment, amongst other things, due to his support of the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and concerns that the Palestinians would be pushed to the margins. That same opposition to his appointment may stem from the strengthening of Qatar and Turkey with Trump, since they saw Blair as someone who cooperates with Israel and wanted to push him aside. If Blair indeed does not end up heading the Peace Council, it may greatly complicate the American efforts to rebuild the Gaza Strip because Blair enjoys Israel's trust and was amongst the few figures in the international community who spoke with Israel and took its positions and security needs into considerations. In any case, not much is known about Trump's Peace Council, even though he announced his intention to form it about 2 months ago when he published his 20-point plan for Gaza. The Washington Post reported that Blair is responsible for significant elements integrated into the plan that Trump presented and credited him with the initial sketch. This initial sketch included the 20-point plan, which includes, as noted, the Peace Council, which will manage the Gaza Strip until reforms are carried out in the Palestinian Authority that will allow Israel to agree that it takes the reins of government. Now, the name of another international diplomat is mentioned as the leading candidate to replace Blair in this role. The former Bulgarian Foreign Minister Nikolai Mladenov, who also served from 2015 to 2020 as the United Nations Secretary General's envoy to the Middle East. He currently serves as the head of the Diplomatic Academy for Cadets of the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi. At 53 years old, Mladenov is widely respected and considered one of the most experienced diplomats in the world in the Middle East conflict and the Israeli-Palestinian dispute, and is well remembered as someone who in his role succeeded several times in preventing confrontation between Israel and Hamas. Most importantly, he currently enjoys great trust from Israel. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on this issue, so keep spreading the truth, share and follow us, and most importantly, help us tell the story of what really is happening here in Israel with as many people as possible. And now we are switching our focus to the northern arena. Israeli officials have expressed frustration at Lebanon's insufficient action to disarm Hezbollah, warning that the terrorist organization is recovering on all fronts and sending a threatening message that they will not wait forever before taking matters into their own hands. But in practice, Israel is waiting for the green light from the man with the last word, who's President of the United States, Donald Trump. He does not want to see a deterioration of the peace that he speaks of in the Middle East. And with that in mind, the United States has asked Israel to grant the Lebanese government additional time to complete the demilitarization of southern Lebanon, meaning the area south of the Litani River, the area that is close to the Israeli border. The Americans made it clear to the Lebanese that if they do not act now, they will not be able to stop Israel from acting. Israel's message in response to the Americans and through them to the Lebanese is as stated, that we will not wait forever, and that amongst Israel's response options is also the possibility of intensified action. The assessment in Israel is that the Lebanese government wants to act to disarm Hezbollah, but is unable to do so due to a combination of lack of capacity and the threats from Hezbollah that if they even try anything, it will lead to a renewal of a civil war in the land of the cedars, Lebanon. There is no question that the capacity of the Lebanese army, which relies on funding on a state suffering from a deep economic crisis, is limited. And although the government in Beirut has transferred budgets to the army, it struggles to recruit more soldiers because they get paid less than what Hezbollah is giving its terrorists. And it's worth mentioning that in this context, that the monthly salary that a Lebanese army is paying its soldiers is just a fraction of what Hezbollah is paying its own fighters. It's a very, very tough situation. And the Israeli intelligence officials have said that Hezbollah has made significant progress in its efforts to recover its ability to strike Israel. According to them, there is a significant inflow of Iranian money to the terrorist organization, and much of it is flowing through Turkey. However, the Lebanese National Army has not been completely inactive over the past year, and according to their estimates, they have in fact demolished around 80% of Hezbollah's military and their infrastructure south of the Litani River. Israeli officials are skeptical of this estimate, and in any case, they have said that they do not believe that the Lebanese National Army will meet the deadline that Washington set for disarming and dismantling Hezbollah by the end of this year, south of the Litani River. Israel did agree to open civil negotiations with Lebanon, and next week another meeting will be held, but the tension, as noted, is rising. The matter will be discussed at Netanyahu's meeting with Trump in Florida at the end of the month, and then it will apparently become clear whether Israel has a green light to act militarily in Lebanon. And once again, the Syrian issue will also be at the center of these meetings, as the Americans want to see progress towards a security agreement with the regime of President Ahmed al-Sharaa, with the stalemate in the negotiations in the background regarding Israel's demands for a demilitarization of southern Syria. Israel demands guarantees that a humanitarian corridor will be maintained for the Jews in El Saweda, but the Syrians completely oppose any infringement on their sovereignty, so a mechanism is now being sought that will ensure the free flow of humanitarian aid to the Druze community. The al-Julani regime has agreed in principle to the demilitarization south of Damascus, but the problem from Israel's perspective is the lack of enforcement, that the limited capabilities of regime forces relative to other armed factions in the country. The Syrian regime is demanding an Israeli withdrawal from 5 points in that area, but Israel is not prepared to withdraw before it is certain that the demilitarization is real and that humanitarian aid to the Druze community is guaranteed. In a related story, next week, the American envoy to Syria and to Lebanon, Tom Barak, who also serves as the United States ambassador to Turkey, will arrive in Israel, and he will meet with Netanyahu to apologize for his remark that aroused anger in Jerusalem, according to which Israel can claim it is a democracy, but in this region, what works best, whether you like it or not, is a benevolent monarchy. It was very strange to hear this from a senior American official, and I'm glad to see that Barak is coming to apologize for it. You can also tell me what you think about this in the comments. I'm interested to hear what you have to say. So, for their part, Israeli officials have already expressed their own thoughts on Barak, saying that they consider him to be a hostile actor in the region who promotes the interests of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan while never missing an opportunity to poison Trump's ear against Israel. And due to the Israeli anger, the American administration instructed Barak to come to Israel as soon as possible and strengthen things out with Netanyahu. However, Israeli officials are also furious that Barak is pushing Trump to return Turkey to the F-35 program, from which it was removed in 2019 after it purchased the S-400 systems from Russia. This issue will also be raised at Netanyahu's meeting with Trump later this month, as well as Erdogan's intensifying incitement against Israel. This included his recent hosting in Istanbul of a conference of senior imams from around the Muslim world, where he spoke and then listened as explicit calls were made for the destruction of Israel. So, as you can see, just like the biblical prophets said will happen, Israel is not lacking for enemies in this season of history. Although Jews are one of the smallest nations in the world, and Israel is a tiny state surrounded by much larger enemies, everyone is obsessed with us, and usually not in a good way. So we need your help. Please continue to support Israel and learn what's going on here for real. Help us share the truth and pray for the situation. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And now we are switching our focus once again back to the Gaza Strip. We need to expose for a moment the true evil and horror of Hamas terrorists and give a voice to Avi Marciano, the father of Noah Marciano, who was amongst those that were murdered by Hamas. So this week we learned via video report uploaded on Wednesday by the pro-Israel activist Shai Deloka that Avi learned of his daughter's death in Hamas captivity from a video sent to him by Hamas terrorists on Telegram. In the video attached to the post, Marciano explains that in the recordings that was sent to me, Noah said that they were being bombed. She spoke about her family and asked to stop the bombing because you could hurt us. When the forces approached Noah's location, the terrorists decided to smuggle her to the center of Gaza City. In the escape, Noah was injured in the leg but also in the head, but not a life-threatening injury. After that, they evacuated her to the Shifa hospital in Gaza. He continued to say that in the hospital, one of the medical personnel decided to murder her and injected air into her vein and thus essentially ended her life. Their father received a notification of Noah's murder by being sent a video via Telegram in which Noah begs for her life, and at the end of this video, there is a segment where Noah is seen close up while she is still sweating but has no life in her. After that, they tried to smuggle Noah out of the hospital, and the IDF forces were there following intelligence information. Only after a week did we manage to bring Noah to a burial in Israel, in the city of Modi'in. He added, "What I went through is the biggest nightmare I know a person can go through. To this day, There are many mornings when I wake up with that video. Noah was my eldest daughter, whom I loved so much, and there isn't a moment in the day when she isn't missing. So we are reporting this story to you, to all of you, because we need you to understand this is an evil terrorist organization. The Hamas terrorist organization is doing these evil things because they hate life, they hate us. This is the evil that university students all over the United States, Canada, Western Europe, and many other places around the world say that they support because they see Hamas as freedom fighters. Noah Marciano's father shared his daughter's story, her abduction to Gaza, and the inconceivable moment when her final moments were filmed and sent to him via telegram as a form of psychological warfare and torture. A parent should never have to learn of their child's fate in such a way, and Hamas did this to Avi Marciano out of sheer cruelty and spite. But it's also important to remember that the person who took Noah's life wasn't even a Hamas terrorist. It was a civilian, a medical professional who at some point had taken an oath to preserve life. Let that sink in. In Gaza, if you are a Jew, your life means nothing. Not to the terrorists and not to the majority of the Palestinian civilians. This is the truth that the world refuses to confront. We owe Noah our voice. We owe her father our courage. And we owe the world the truth. So continue to pray for the people of Israel and for the truth. Together, we will fight this injustice in the world, and with your help, we will correct and destroy this evil. So please, share these videos with as many people as possible and help us reach people around the world with the truth. And now, we have one more story to report to you this week, and it's about how on Wednesday, a Daily Mail reporter received permission to enter and see Hamas's tunnels. She arrived with an opinion not the most positive about Israel, to see the terrorist tunnels where Hadar Goldin was held. The coverage was on the newspaper's front page and on one of the largest websites in Britain with the headline, "Inside Hamas's Hell." The reporter, Natalie Lisbona, entered with several foreign media personnel into the Hamas tunnel where hostages experienced unbearable hell during 2 years of torture and executions. She noted that although she knows that the terrorists are no longer there, my instincts tell me to turn around and leave. She also wrote, "It is inconceivable that many of the hostages were held in such tunnels in complete darkness, some for almost 2 years. Hamas ate in front of their eyes after stealing aid intended for civilians. They denied the hostages food, water, and sanitation. Some were kept in cages. Some were assaulted in cramped cells. The bodies of those murdered in such tunnels were found with a curved spine after they could not stand upright for over a year." She noted that in this very maze, the body of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin, the hostage held the longest for more than 11 years, was hidden. She also noted the involvement of the United Nations in terror, saying that within spitting distance of this compound is a building managed by UNRWA, a United Nations organization that supports the Palestinian, which Israel accuses of employing Hamas members. Nearby are UNRWA schools and mosques. The IDF says that amongst the senior Hamas commanders who used this specific tunnel route was the Rafah Brigade commander, Muhammad Shabana. The reporter also mentioned that policeman Ran Guiyali, who lost his life fighting the terrorists on October 7th, and his body was kidnapped into Gaza, saying despite suffering a broken shoulder, he went out to confront the terrorists head-on and gave his life to protect others. It is nice to see that despite the massive bias against Israel in the international media, there are still a few voices willing to report the truth. And here at TBN Israel, we always report the truth of what's happening in Israel, but we need your help to spread it. Now more than ever, and you need to remember, this is a spiritual war. The only way to fight a spiritual war is by praying and asking God to intervene. So join me in prayer. As you pray, pray for wisdom to our leaders. Pray for the IDF soldiers that are risking their lives. Pray for the families of the hostages. Pray for the children of Israel. And let's pray also for our enemies. Let's pray for the Iranian people, that we love them dearly, and pray for better leadership for them. Let's pray for the people of the Gaza Strip to have better leadership, to stop hating on Israel. Let's pray for the people of Yemen, the people of Lebanon, the people of Syria. Let's pray for a change of heart in this region. Let's pray for peace. Let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.